welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. No need for any of the major housekeeping out of the way, so let's get right into the news. First, we're going to talk about some electoral news. As you see, the day I'm recording this, the 24th, is the exact same day that Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District will be holding its runoff of its, congressional race. Originally, I endorsed Gary Chambers, and I neglected to endorse in the runoff. Now, I was originally sort of in the realm of potentially supporting Karen Carter Peterson, as she's sort of considered, I've dubbed this crowd the runoff progressive, the person who isn't necessarily the most progressive option in the race, but they're progressive enough to be like, I could see us supporting them, and they'll give us what we want, pretty much. Maybe they'll be a bit more, conciliatory, but they'll still more than likely give us what we want. Examples of which would be like Kevin De Leon, Georgette Gomez, Beth Doglio. While we originally support, a different person in the primary, or in the original election, they're progressive enough that I could have legitimately seen myself supporting them. Karen even got some pretty big endorsements, which actually led to a bit of controversy, because Our Revolution endorsed her over Gary Chambers, and many people saw that as a betrayal, because they saw Gary Chambers as the more progressive candidate, as he wasn't a career politician. He didn't really have any he wasn't any career politician. He was an activist through and through, which many people saw as an asset rather than a hindrance. And he was so close to making it to the runoff. He was really close. People weren't even, I wasn't even expecting him to be as close as he did, but he was really close to making it to the runoff. In fact, many people argue that his role in the race actually is what contributed to there being a runoff in the first place. Gary tried his best to try and gravitate many people towards Karen Carter Peterson, but there were a lot of people that were a bit hesitant. You see, originally I was going to endorse Karen Carter Peterson, but then I looked into something that made me really question her decision in regards to the DNC chair race. For those who don't know, 2017, we had a DNC chair race that many people saw as the big push for progressivism, as after the DNC screwed Bernie, they were we need to move to this thing and try and influence the Democratic Party this way. And it was this big heated battle between Tom Perez and Keith Ellison, the two individuals that were seen as the figureheads that were trying to represent their own factions of the progressive centrist movement within the Democratic Party. Perez was garnering all the endorsements of the pro-establishment politicians, whereas Keith Ellison was getting all the progressive endorsements. But inevitably, Perez managed to pull through, and Ellison didn't really get to be that. But as a show of unity, they did the whole thing where it's I nominate Ellison to be my deputy chair. But you see, the thing is, I looked into that endorsement, and she didn't endorse Ellison. She endorsed Perez, and the last progressive that endorsed Perez that I trusted was Deb Haaland, and Deb was not really that good. I didn't like her. So I was hesitant to endorse Karen Carter Peterson. And lo and behold, turns out that really wouldn't have mattered in the long run, because as of the time I'm recording this, Troy Carter is slated to win. He has 57.1% of the vote compared to Karen's 42.9%. So he's in a comfortable enough lead that many people are saying, yeah, it's pretty much over. Now, if this ends up not being the case and she manages to pull a big win near the end of the night, then I'll look like an idiot. Now, speaking of Ellison, this is the next story, the Derek Chauvin trial. I'm really late to the party, but my podcast is weekly, so that's how it is. Chauvin is guilty. I don't know what his sentencing is yet. It has yet to be determined, but he is guilty and is going to be sentenced. This reaction is, of course, mixed on the internet, but I think this statement from Keith Ellison, the individual who was basically in charge of putting Chauvin in jail, putting the case and trying to see if he's guilty, this statement sums it up perfectly.
I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States.
Very, very poignant words. A stark contrast to Nancy Pelosi's words, because, she's a white woman who literally had no experience in this whatsoever. Meanwhile, Keith Ellison is a person who's grown up in the area, he knows what he's talking about, and has a history of fighting for these issues. I guess I should add some words from Kyle Kalinske. Many people have been saying, Kyle was the first person to say it that I know of, but there was something that I saw that, when he said it, I was like, you gonna bring that up right now? But I did, think about it for a second and be like, I guess it's worth mentioning. I looked up the words Keith Ellison and president, and there were some results at the time that the trial took place. So I'm gonna have to say on that subject, because that's not the important part of the story. The important part of the story is Chauvin is tried, and he's guilty AF, and time for him to go to jail. Now let's move on to the next story. This is something regarding a issue that Ellison was actually very poignant about. Israel. Remember last week when I talked about Betty McCollum and she was trying to push for a bill that was gonna try and condition U.S. aid to Israel? Well, a bipartisan letter was written by 330 members of Congress, led by Ted Deutsch and Michael McCall, who have been trying to oppose this. Basically, they wrote a letter saying, "We condemn what Betty McCollum is doing, and we think that the United States should not condition their aid to Israel," which is definitely not a good thing. Now, when I saw this, I was like, okay, time to do some digging. How many progressives are on this list? And quite a few, to say the least. Andy Levin, Jan Skrzydowski, Jamie Raskin, Mondaire Jones, Teresa Ligar Fernandez, Mark Takano, and the one that hurt the most, my boy Ro Khanna. Why you do this to me? I expected this shit from Raul Grijalva, but not you. But Raul Grijalva is actually not on the list, so that's good. The members who are not on this list, of course, I commend very greatly. Yeah, you are on the list. Cool. Usual suspects, AOC, Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Chuy Garcia. But again, the people who signed it, they're in that Washington bubble. They think that, we need, that's just one of the things that just we just need to do this. Which is very, very not, you gotta learn better. That's all I gotta say on that. Now, speaking of introducing bills and legislation, Joe Manchin has officially thrown his support behind the PRO Act. He has announced that he's supporting the PRO Act. It will block right-to-work laws, and, Manchin sort of tried to, explain it in a way that made sense for him. He's from West Virginia, that's a pretty strong union state. A lot of people are like, oh, you're union strong, and blah, blah, blah. Which now makes the sponsor total a grand total of 47 Senate sponsors, leaving just 3 Senate Dems left. Mark Warner of Virginia, Mark Kelly, and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. Oh boy, and Kyrsten Sinema has made it pretty well known that she is more than likely not going to be co-sponsoring it. Because when many people talked about this and tried to raise this issue to her attention, she said, but what about the business owners? And that's going to definitely be a problem, as union leaders are saying that the PRO Act is their litmus test. They're support the PRO Act or not. And, Chuck Schumer stated that he's not going to bring it to a vote unless he knows that all the Senate Dems are going to vote for it. And even then, there's potential arguments and problems leading to the potential of a filibuster. What will become of the PRO Act? I don't know. We're going to have to find out soon. But if you happen to know where Kyrsten Sinema's address is, or a mailing address, maybe write a strongly worded letter. Next story is coming from the New York mayoral race. And unsurprisingly, we're talking about Andrew Yang again. Because Andrew Yang, he's the only candidate that anybody actually cares about in this race, unfortunately. He's the only candidate that's going to get clicks, unfortunately. So, of course, everybody's going to talk about him and all of his many, many flaws. And oh boy, did he do a good one today. Andrew Yang had a meeting with the Stonewall Democrats of New York City, the largest LGBTQ group in the New York Democratic Party, and basically it was a screening call for, like, getting their endorsement, because they're gotta endorse somebody. That's one of the big things. Getting their endorsement is sort of like, we got support of the gay community. However, the way Yang went about it was not the best, to say the very least. Now, here's the thing. Yang supporters have been trying to paint this as like, oh, why does the media only talk about Andrew Yang? Why do they keep trying to make Andrew Yang look bad? And like trying to paint this all as like they're blowing it out of the proportion. But it's like, if Yang wants to be mayor of a city, he deserves scrutiny. Now, is the media, of course, probably scrutinizing him a bit too much? Duh. He's an outsider candidate. Well, sort of. In this race, I don't know if that's really the case, but basically, like, that was his whole shtick. Like, I'm the outsider. I'm the normal man. But this is really just like, oh my god, dude, why? One of the big things about Andrew Yang is that he's been known for, like, being very tone deaf in a lot of his, like, responses. And this one is no exception, because when he went to the Gay Rights Democratic Club, pretty much, all he would talk about was, like, gay bars. And, like, wasn't actually trying to talk about substantive issues, but basically trying to paint his campaign as, like, oh, I'm super pro-gay and blah, blah, blah. Like, for example, they would be like, hey, Andrew, how you doing? And he'd be like, well, guys, like, I mean, I know the LGBT community really well. I mean, my co-chairs are gay. My campaign co-chairs are gay. I mean, what's the problem? And me and them want to go to a gay bar all the time. Haha, yeah, isn't that cool? Yeah, pretty cool. I'm just like you guys. Haha. And they'd respond with like, okay, but we kind of want to talk about like substantive issues. Like, for example, we've been facing a lot of issues in regards to like murders of trans individuals because of hate crimes. What's your response to this, Andrew Yang? Boy, the cubbyhole is pretty cool, bro. Well, okay, I mean, what about the fact that a lot of LGBTQ youth are kicked out of their homes and are usually not accepted into new homes because of the fact that they're gay? Care to respond? Bro, Golden Girls? That's pretty lit, dude. Okay, a lot of LGBTQ youth, particularly intersex people, have a lot of harmful genital surgery when they're infants and are not able to give it a choice in the matter. How would you like to respond to that? Dude, traps are pretty lit. Okay, well, technically, those latter two I made up what Andrew Yang said, and it's just, but you get my point. The cubbyhole thing I said of him like wanting to go to gay bars, that's real. That's what he said. But you get my point. My point is that Andrew Yang basically ignored the actual substantive issues at hand and, for lack of a better term, tried to play identity politics. Like, bro, I know gay people. Gay people are cool. Vote for me. I know the gays as well as anybody. Like, I basically summed the thing in a meme where I had Andrew Yang like do that thing where it's like, hello, how do you do, fellow gays? And it's like, that's pretty much what he did. And it's always been an issue with Yang. Even back then, that was his whole thing. Like, he was a one-issue candidate, but then he was propelled into the position where he had to become a multiple-issue candidate, and due to that, he doesn't actually have any substance outside of that one issue. Andrew Yang, I guarantee you, he did not expect to get to the point where he is today. Andrew Yang expected to be a footnote in the U.S. history books. Maybe he'd get on the first two debate stages, maybe push the issue of UBI, and then drop out at one point. But no, they pushed him to the point where he literally was like, became a major candidate. A push that I began because I was the first person to actually take Andrew Yang seriously as a candidate. And then, to be fair, take him seriously as a candidate, but I mean, you gotta understand who he is. He was a one-issue guy that tried to push into being a multiple-issue guy. And even the one issue that he stood for, he kind of went weird on it. Like his UBI plan, when it was discovered, hey, he was using the Milton Friedman version. He made it like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll change my UBI plan. Now it's the left-wing version. It's like, that's a bit weird. This was like the thing you built your entire campaign on, and now you're literally changing it on a whim? It's a bit weird, dude, not to say the least. And the Yang, what's happening with Yang now is sort of the same thing what happening with Bernie back in the day. People don't really know anything else outside of Yang. Like, Yang is their entire ideology at this point. Wait for Yang gangers to get a bit older and you'll understand that they'll probably evolve their platform and evolve to actually have somewhat political sense. But anyways, on to another individual that shouldn't be taken seriously as a candidate. Caitlyn Jenner has announced that she is going to run for California governor. You see, Gavin Newsom is currently facing a potential recall election, which is getting increasingly more likely by the day, and Caitlyn Jenner is jumping into the fray. She's clearly trying to do like an Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, take a politician that's becoming increasingly unpopular, and then use her fame to slide into the fray. And I assume she's actually trying to get, like, I don't know, maybe I think like liberal wine moms. I mean, I think she's gonna try and aim for like some like moderate Dem crowd to a degree, especially considering this recall is slated to be really weird. You know, if it happens, we don't know if this is gonna happen, or even then, we don't even know if Gavin Newsom is gonna face any potential actual problems with being recalled. Like, I mean, Newsom is not as unpopular as Gray Davis. Newsom has a chance to slide through, especially considering this one is a lot more like shady. Like, the reason why people are doing this recall to begin with is literally because Gavin Newsom instituted some COVID like restrictions. That's why this recall is happening, and a lot more people are a bit more likely to actually try and like actually live during COVID-19. So not a lot of people are really jumping onto this as, like, it may happen, like enough people might be mad that they actually will try to recall him, but they don't know if that like will actually translate to him making it to the thing. And especially Caitlyn Jenner is probably going to have a harder time than Arnold, especially because people don't like Caitlyn Jenner for a number of reasons. Like, I mean, let's be honest, Republican Party doesn't like Caitlyn Jenner for a very, very obvious reason. And a lot of people on other sides of the aisle don't like her because she's a Republican, like a very strong Republican, conservative Republican. So I don't really think that I don't know how far she's going to go. We'll find out soon enough. But anyways, now on to the main topic of this video. Now, I wasn't sure if I should do like publication on its own, but since this publication is like so intertwined with the individual in question, it's best to like actually talk about them at once, because it's like Cenk Uygur and TYT. You can't really talk about Cenk Uygur without talking about TYT. This is their baby, and I mean, this is essentially who they are on the internet. So we're going to talk about the Grayzone and their leader, Max Blumenthal. For those who don't know who Blumenthal is, basically think of him as a smaller Glenn Greenwald, pretty much. In many ways, you'll see what I mean. Blumenthal was born in 1977, graduated from University of Pennsylvania with a bachelor's degree in history. He ended up becoming a journalist, writing for a lot of publications, including Lebanon's Al Akbar, and is mostly written in regards to like conflicts in the Middle East, like the Israel-Palestine situation, the Syrian civil war, etc., etc. Writing for a lot of publications such as the Daily Beast, the Huffington Post, The Nation, Al Jazeera, NY Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Monthly. But the most controversial is his publications on things such as Press TV, RT, and his baby, the Grayzone. It was originally part of like a larger network of like left-wing websites, like by like a website titled Alternet. But since 2018, he's kind of been independent in a lot of his features. Some have raised eyebrows to the independent part of it, as many people have argued Max Blumenthal works for RT, so there's potential that maybe they are funding his website, and by definition, sort of Russia is giving funding to his website, which, I mean, I don't know if that's the case, But I mean, him, like, getting money from RT is really weird. It's always been a weird, like, tangent for me, because I remember back in the day when RT was, like, the woke, like people would, like, legitimately be like, yeah, I'll watch RT, because it was the network you weren't supposed to watch. You know, conservatives watch Fox News, liberals watch CNN, but the real anti-establishmentarian guys, they watch RT. Ooh. And they'll probably get a video all to themselves, because there's a lot of people who still believe that, but, I mean, it's nothing really. Like, it's another news network, and even more so, it's one that's literally funded by the Russian government. I'm not saying everything on RT is crap, or everything on RT is amazing. It's like every other news network in history. But you'll see it in this... They're popular in this sort of... in the same crowd as the people who like the Grayzone. The crowd of people that are like, don't listen to the BBC, they're American propaganda. Now go watch RT. They are the real news network. But RT will get a video all of themselves, so not really much to go about them here. This is about the Grayzone. RT's, like, edgy younger brother. That's definitely one way to call it that. But it's like a very reasonable crowd to look at, because what Grayzone really is a crowd of is the anti-establishment crowd. Like, anybody who calls themselves anti-establishment can look at the Grayzone and be like, yeah, I agree with that. Because they've said a lot of things that appeal to right-wingers and left-wingers. They are in that sort of, like, red-brown or, like, left populist, right populist crowd that everybody keeps trying to point to. Now, whether or not they're, like, paid actors to do all this is one thing. I mean, it's potential, but, like, basically what their ideology amounts to is this. America, bad. That's it. And that's the big ideology. That's a large net. A lot of people happen to believe that, but for very different reasons. Some people think America bad because it's super imperialist and tries to take over the world. There's some people who think America is bad because they allow Jewish people to exist. But a lot of people agree with that sentiment, America bad. And essentially, that is what they will do. They will try to push you into being like, oh yeah, America bad. And they basically want to be whatever ideology you think you are, because that's what's going to get you to click on their website. They don't really care which ideology they claim to be theirs. Of course, their whole thing is like they try to be left-wings, but they're also open to like being like connected to like right-wingers. They frequently make appearances on Tucker Carlson's show. They like love it when like right-wing websites share their stuff. And like I said, they've gotten some people to appraise their work that they probably shouldn't. David Duke and Richard Spencer really love Max Blumenthal's work. They really do. Now, of course, Blumenthal himself is, like, I would assume that he's not, like an anti-Semitic person. I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But he definitely aims towards that crowd. It's like the reason, like, Tucker Carlson doesn't have to be a white nationalist. But it just so happens, you can say everything but white nationalism. That's literally the Southern strategy. He's doing the Southern strategy, but for this. I don't have to say this, but wink, wink. Because Blumenthal has gotten to do a bit more than just, oh, we criticize the Israeli government. He spread a shit ton of conspiracy theories about George Soros, claiming that he's funding the protesters in Hong Kong and Venezuela and Nicaragua, echoing the right-wing conspiracy theory that George Soros is funding. Well, I mean, it's weird. Like, he's echoing it, but also it's clearly in the antithesis of that crowd. But that crowd will definitely jump onto the George Soros train because this is supposedly the evidence that he's funding other groups. So he's clearly funding something. See, that's the thing about conspiracy theorists, is that the conspiracies don't have to align. They don't have to make sense. But it doesn't matter if they make sense or not. Of course, they're also in that crowd of, like, denying the Xinjiang genocide, pretty much. Like, I mean, the fact that there's anybody in the world that legitimately doesn't even accept the facts of the situation are just stupid. Because this is such a dumb conspiracy, completely batshit insane, like, conspiracy level. I have like 5 hours of video of people going in depth and looking into what is going on in Xinjiang and going on with the Uyghurs and explaining the situation with sources right there. But no, that doesn't count. And you can't reason with them, because literally no matter what you say, it's immediately just like, American propaganda. You know Zenz isn't really Nobody mentioned Zenz once. That's one of the big things that they keep going to, like Zenz. I don't bring up Zenz at all. I brought up Zenz like one time, and then I'm like, okay, here's a source that Zenz had no involvement in. But even then, many people don't even look at the fact, like, but, I mean, yeah, Zenz might have some problems, but what if the source is legit? Like, for example, people know my biases, but that doesn't mean that I can't report on things objectively. It's really just like, oh man, come on, like, they really just don't know things. It's the crowd they have to go for. The crowd that easily buys into conspiracies, because that's the crowd they need to get to. The crowd that doesn't look into things. One of their other main individuals, Ben Norton, who's been like a prominent member of the Grayzone, he literally made a statement that was literally just like, how are you this dumb? Like, he made a statement that literally said like, oh, this individual who is in charge of like the new left, he is the reason that the left transitioned from a anti-imperialist, class-based crowd into a race-based crowd. Which is stupid if you know anything about the new left. Claiming that the new left is not anti-imperialist is completely an antithesis to who the new left was, and shows you have absolutely zero clue about the new left versus old left conflict. The old left was class, nothing else. The new left was the race and anti-imperialist side, because their main issue was the Vietnam War. And yet you're gonna claim that they're not anti-imperialist? It was the class reductionist old left that was like, don't even talk about this Vietnam War because it's distracting from the worldwide socialist revolution. Groups were literally being created specifically to like oppose their imperialist rhetoric. The Socialist Workers' Party, which is the dominant party of the new left, they were the ones who were saying that the Korean War was imperialist. But then a small faction of them, who eventually became the Workers' World Party, were like, this isn't imperialist, this is class-based. You don't understand anything. They also really love to, like I said, one thing that they, like, have been known for was, like, the idea that they mostly base their ideology on what is anti-American. And whatever is the targets of America, they have to be for. Like, America doesn't like Iran, they don't like Venezuela, they don't like China, they don't like Russia, so they have to be pro all those people, which leads to them making BS statements. Ben Norton, once again, basically, he and a lot of this huge crowd basically try to go like, oh yeah, well, of course, these guys are imperialists because they support the Dalai Lama. What? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What do you mean? Well, you see, here's what happened. The CIA funded the Tibetan independence movement very early on. So that means the Tibetan independence movement is a CIA psyop. I mean, of course, ignore the fact that not only has Tenzin Gyatso, the current Dalai Lama, stated that he opposes the CIA involvement and regrets it because it was clearly just them trying to get, like, China to be destabilized, but also the fact that they stopped giving the Tibetan independence movement funding as soon as Richard Nixon changed his mind on the Chinese, policy. As soon as he wanted to be friendly toward the Chinese, all of a sudden the money dried up. Because remember, the United States treats the entire world as a chessboard. As soon as the game gets boring, you throw the game away and start a new one. But of course, that doesn't take with them. Much in the same way a lot of things don't take with them. If you give them literal information, that doesn't matter to them, because they have their preconceived notions. Of course George Soros funds all these groups. Why wouldn't he? Because he's the bad guy. Duh. Of course the CIA tries to take down China. I mean, it's natural, right? Well, yeah, of course. Then that means that genocide doesn't happen, right? Well, no, that doesn't mean anything. Like, and the same crowd, they'll get mad and up in arms when the US does something, but then when one of their big, great nations does it, then all of a sudden it's a really not a bad thing. For example, COVID-19. You see, this crowd happens to be very into the anti-vax crowd, so naturally, they're going to lead into some conspiracy theories about the virus. One of the main conspiracy theories that most people know about is the conspiracy theory that the Chinese government created COVID-19 in a lab. Now, the Grayzone has, of course, denied this. No. Stop it. Stop saying that a Chinese lab created the virus. Stop. And now it's like, well, that's very commendable. They're willing to stand up to COVID denial. They're actually willing to go against their audience and saying how this is actually not it was actually created in a United States lab. China told me so. Of course, because that was the crazy part of the conspiracy theory, wasn't it? That was the crazy part. Yeah, sure, I know the whole basis of the conspiracy theory is the fact that since it was created in China, that's why it broke out in China, because they were working on it in the lab in China. But no, you see, it was actually the United States that did it. Much in the same way the United States somehow was able to hire many people to somehow manage to fake a genocide without anybody in the United States ever actually finding out the truth. Well, except for Max Blumenthal. He's the big brain boy here. But of course, he doesn't want you to have all the information. That's just not the truth of the information. Another example, in fact, a pretty big example, was in regards to his coverage of the Venezuelan industry, like what's going on in Venezuela. Now, a lot of people, like, you know, the right-wing like thing is like, oh, in Venezuela, people can't afford food. You know, there's nothing in the supermarkets and blah blah blah. Like that, you know that jazz. Well, basically, Max Blumenthal was like, I'm gonna prove you wrong. So he went to Venezuela himself and basically said, look, see, there's food. What? There's food on the shelves. Oh my goodness. And it's only for $1? $1? And I will get these entire loaves of bread? What? This is crazy. It's almost as if the United States has been making all this stuff up about Venezuela. That does seem pretty damning at first. Except for the fact that he actually doesn't mention that in Venezuela, it just so happens that the new minimum wage is $4.60 a month. And in fact, he even goes a step further. Like, not just with that. Like, the way I describe it is basically he did reverse poverty porn. For those who don't know what that term means, it's basically like, you've ever seen those commercials where it's like people in Africa, and they only show people in Africa like bare bones, they like don't have any clothes, and then there's like sad music like, in the arms of an angel, and then it's like, people are like, give money to these people in Africa now, and they will be able to afford shoes, food, and not be able to hunt lions for their food instead. Like, basically, he did that, but in reverse. He went to the most well-off places in Venezuela and basically made it seem like that was all of Venezuela. Much in the same way those commercials try to make you think that that is the entirety of Africa. The concept of a city in Africa, like, many people are like, oh, that can only happen in Marvel Universe. Now, all this came to a head from a video from Bad Empanada, who's mixed, really. Like, everybody's, like, I don't know, most people know about him. Like, he's mixed. Like, I mean, Vosh compared him to, like, he didn't compare him directly, but he made it, like, he said something about another political YouTuber that I'm like, okay, I guess that makes sense with, Bad Empanada as well. You know, like, what I describe is, like, his videos are good, but his Twitter takes are bad. And that same thing can be said about me, really. It can really be said about anybody because, you know, think about it. Videos are supposed to be like us, like, we're putting our best foot forward, but our Twitter is supposed to be like whatever we say. So we're not going to have our best on Twitter. We're going to have our best in our videos, pretty much. Or like any other, like, whatever we're making our big thing. Now, a lot of people like to talk about the fact, like, Max Blumenthal is cringe and Grayzone is cringe and bad takes and stuff. Are they completely? No. But a majority? Yeah, maybe. Especially considering they really are, like, very, very popular in, like, I mean, a lot of people, like, make the comparisons like RT. and they're very popular. Like, a lot of people claim that they're Russian state media, which isn't helped by the fact that for some reason the Grayzone decided to have an article on, like, not an article, but like, they have one of their social media sites is VK, a website that is only popular in Russia. It's like, you're not helping your case. It's like if people are like, I'm not a white supremacist, but then they have a Gab account. It's like, you're not helping your case. But a lot of people don't really actually think about the fact, like, why is Max doing this? Why is Max doing all of this, like, coverage? Why is he trying to be this big anti-establishment guy? Well, one reason is very simple. Money. I mean, Max has got to pay the bills. I mean, that's a fact. He's got to pay the bills. So whatever gives him the most money is what's probably going to be what he's going to do. Now, I'm not going to say that this is all based on this, but when I saw this observation, I literally was like, oh, now I think it makes sense in two accounts. I looked up who Max Blumenthal's dad was, because Max Blumenthal's dad has a Wikipedia page as well. So I was like, who's his dad? Well, his father is a man by the name of Sidney Blumenthal. Now, Sidney was also a very published writer, but for what route? What was his major writing skills? Well, I think this quote sums it up perfectly. Sidney has been described as, quote, the most pro-Clinton writer on the planet, and that his stories in the New Yorker were so unabashedly pro-Clinton that they quickly became the butt of countless jokes. Now, what was his big thing? Like, what was he most known for? Well, he was one of the originators of the Obama conspiracy theory about his citizenship. He was one of the individuals who was going behind the scenes on behalf of Hillary Clinton and saying, you know what, I heard that Barack Obama was actually a citizen of Kenya. Trust me, I'm a journalist. I mean, I can't look into it myself because, I happen to be of, a Clinton friend, but trust me, you should look into this. And it's sort of like, oh, this all makes sense. Max is rebelling against his dad. That's all this is. That's all the Grayzone is. That's all this is. His father was the epitome of the establishment, and to be punk rock, he's going completely against everything his father stands for. But also, since his father influenced him so much, he's going about it the exact same ways that his father did. Well, I mean, it makes sense. His daddy was a journalist, he's a journalist, but of course he's going to do it differently. That's always how it is with your parents and your political views. I mean, I lucked out with having parents that were relatively apolitical, but if you're a person who's into politics, and your parents were also people into politics, all that's going to happen for your political views is that you're going to be either the exact same as your parents, the exact opposite, or like, whatever. Like, those are really the two things. You're either the opposite or you're, like, and that's the thing. His father was like a super Clinton Dem, so naturally he'll be sort of in the opposition of that. So that's all his website is. It's him rebelling against his dad. That's all I gotta say. Max, I hope you work through your daddy issues. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.